whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti ei mauri ora. Well, nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui. Welcome everyone to today's Pūroro Rangaranga Social, Cultural and Economic Committee meeting. Please let myself or Democracy Advisor know if you intend to leave the meeting. We'll break for morning tea at 10:40, lunch at 11:50 and afternoon tea at 3:30, and the meeting is scheduled to conclude at 6 p.m. Well, that might be a bit before, maybe a bit before. So I am now going to call for any apologies. So far I've got Councillor Paul for lateness, Councillor Condi partial absence. She's on Zoom, Morena. I've got Councillor Calvert is absent, and Councillor Rush is joining us by Zoom. He was very committed and came, but is feeling a little bit average today. So yeah, apologies for lateness. He went home. He will be a little bit late to join us on Zoom, but he is coming. So I move the motion that the committee accepts those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pennant. So now we'll put that to the vote. We've got Gina. Give a thumbs up. Councillor Condi also did vote for that. So that is carried. I call on members to declare any conflicts of interest that they may have in relation to items on the agenda. Nope. Confirmation of minutes. I move the motion that the committee approves the minutes of the Pūroro Rangaranga Social, Cultural and Economic Committee meeting held on the 2nd of June 2021, having been circulated, and that they be taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote. Lacondi's a yes. Well, that's everyone, and that is also carried. There are no items not on the agenda, and there's been no requests for public participation. Obviously today we have lots of public submissions, we've got public hearings, none on public participation. So I need to do some suspension of standing orders, and that's for the oral forum, so I'm just going to read out some stuff and then we'll vote on that. So I move the motion that the Pūroro Rangaranga Social, Cultural Economic Committee agree to suspend the following standing orders to allow the oral forum to take place within the committee meeting. So we've got 16.1 mode of address, 16.4 chairperson rising, 16.5 members to speak in place and address the chairperson, 16.6 priority of speakers, rules of debate, the entire section, points of order, the entire section, and agree to reinstate the suspended standing orders at the conclusion of the oral forum. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Free. So I now put that to the vote. Councillor Wolfe, can you press the button? Sometimes it's not sensitive. That is carried. So in accordance with Standing Order 19.1, I accord precedence item 2.4 so that it will be discussed prior to item 2.3. So the agenda will be considered in the following order. So we're going to have the 2.1 Social Wellbeing Framework hearings, then 2.2 Alcohol Fees Bylaw hearings, then 2.4 Aho-Tini 2030 Arts, Culture and Creative Strategy Forum, and then 2.3 Strategy for Children and Young People hearings. Right, so now we're going to get underway, and I'd like to welcome Gail Duncan from St Peter's on Willis Anglican Church Social Justice Group. Nau mai, haere mai, Gail. Great to have you here. So Gail, you've got 10 minutes, and if there's some time within that, there may be some questions from the committee.
Just get my glasses. First of all, I just wanted to say that we are really, really pleased, St Peter's on Willis Social Justice Group, that you have advanced on this recreative, cultural, creative, social and learning exercise of social wellbeing, including it in your 10-year plan and thinking forward. As you well know and stated in your plan, that the inequity and social disparity is increasing. I just have to walk down Lambton Quay like I do to meet up with my husband at lunchtime, and I'm passing people sitting down on the pavements. So St Peter's on Willis, as you know, is an Anglican church serving the people of Te Aro and has a history of social action, including the City Mission, the Downtown Community Ministry, Free Store and the Vincent's Art Workshop. So the main reason for us putting, our social justice group putting in a submission, was to hopefully be able to connect and the City Council would be in a position to utilise the experience that we at St Peter's on Willis have in directly engaging with people in such social circumstances, and also more than that, trying to live and breathe and be part of and enjoy Wellington, which was, very much a major consideration. You want a living, breathing, active city where people can grow, contribute to the economy and that sort of thing. So it's places like St Peter's on Willis and other church and community groups are part of helping you form that harmony. So we're hoping that we will be able to interlink with you and work with and improve on what we're able to do already, and to push forward your initiatives. So there's no one simple idea of wellbeing and no one means of delivery. Wellington City Council policies should make options easy for those who deliver and those who need the delivery. So faith communities and church across the city are vital gathering places, both for the faithful and the secular. Wellington City Council support group enabling establishment of good community ideas that promote connectedness is what's needed, so that we can interlink and be part of that support group. So we believe you need a mechanism to help volunteers deliver the services to our citizens, spaces for social services, community activities, personal learning, not just in one place but distributed throughout the city. St Peter's itself, the building, is a haven of peace for use as a personal space. People sit in the garden, people need quiet personal spaces as well, and so that's part of, it doesn't have to be just our church, but anywhere where a person might sit down and feel safe and reflect and hear the birds singing, that sort of thing, and people going backwards and forwards. And we're also likely to focus quite strongly, and I think you've begun that focus, on the philosophy of the commons. The idea of the centre of the village, and I don't just mean everything focused right in central Wellington by saying that. I mean there'll be pockets of centres of the village that everyone has access to at no cost, extended to all citizens-owned assets to encourage activities that lead to a healthy city. And activities together means we get to know each other, understand each other, breaks down prejudices, and maybe opens opportunities for work and fellowship for people. So there's a lot of pressure to minimise rate increases, but we all know that we're going to have some form of equitable increase in rates to be able to make the city the place you want it to be with that sort of buzz. You can't have a vibrant, mentally exciting and safe city unless we all contribute, and when I say that all, I mean proportional to ability to contribute. So our suggestions are to establish a resource to encourage volunteers to participate, which means a resource within your City Council. Better utilisation of resources and buildings, making an economic success of council-owned facilities by allowing community use of them. Flexible attitude to innovative and new ideas for the use of community resources. Encouraging and perhaps even paying in some instances volunteers to manage and use these resources. And again, to create more citizen spaces for green activities, for example, just spaces to understand your environmental things, and spaces to enjoy the environment, spaces to build the environment, mean, it was great fun to hear a kaka on my way to work this morning, right by the government buildings. Also, as you know, St Peter's on Willis helps with housing refugees. We've got a refugee family we're starting to bring in just in the next month or so. And we're concerned that we want this Wellington City to be inclusive, to both give to them our culture, and that's our whole culture of the city, and also to embrace their culture. So, and we would like opportunities of facilitating networking between groups and organisations to permit a broader involvement. And I don't know how many minutes I've used up, but we do have Maslow's hierarchy of needs that is mentioned in our submission. Safe, secure housing and wraparound support would be a huge part of that. And does this provision that you mention include personnel working with council tenants? We note the recent sad death of a solitary man in a city council apartment, and others previously, highlights the importance of that provision. So it goes right down to the single individual, your idea of wellbeing. And with the recent proposal of Wellington City Council housing to a chip, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that with respect to your wellbeing initiative? We really do ask you to consider that. And when we're talking about community spaces for social gathering, like those little reading pods that were mentioned in our submission, which could be anywhere from a cafe to a library, right dotted around the city, this needs to be inclusive for solitary and homeless people. We're still going to have them, even if we would love there to be an enormous bracket of social wellbeing so that every unhomed person could be homed, but we need to have a welcoming environment for the solitary and the homeless. And also, where there are people begging in the city, do you have a sort of some means of doing a circuit and making sure that they have connections to the welfare that's available? So that's in addition to what we already submitted. So do you have any answers to my questions or questions of me?
There's a lot of questions there, very good questions too.
Yeah.
Councillors, were there any questions for the questions? Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Of course, you do an amazing job. Just wondering, about how you think we should pay for everything. I presume so in terms of the division of responsibility between central government and local government, private enterprise, individuals, because we've obviously got quite a few challenges.
Yes, well, from that lens, we're more thinking that you've got resources that are perhaps underutilised, and there are community volunteer organisations such as St Peter's on Willis who might be able to help you guide to at least get the utilisation of those off the ground, and that in turn might require some finance but should bring some sort of money in through subscriptions and engagement and reduction of social harms. And that needs to be built in. We're very concerned about resources being underutilised to give the wellbeing and wellness that could be provided.
Deputy Mayor Free.
Thank you. It's really useful, Gail. What sort of resources might be underutilised?
It's buildings mainly was the thing that we identified, that there are buildings that might be out of action for very good reason. We understand that. So, and there could be funding from government, including your own, and to combine with your own funding to bring those buildings up to standard, such that they could have community and perhaps private usage, such that, both.
Do you see a role for us to work more closely with volunteer groups such as yourself to make approaches to government? Because we are trying to get a better...
Very much so. That's exactly it. If you are trying to build up a case, we would very much like to be able to participate to assist you with that. So, and that wouldn't, I'm sure I wouldn't be speaking just for St Peter's on Willis here. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of other organisations, but we would not be the only ones that would be inclined to be, we'd like to be invited to a table, but like to develop, you could say we are in the process of developing such and such, and perhaps do a targeted consultation with us present.
Councillor Young. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you very much, Gail,
Thank
for
you.
your submission and for the mahi that you do in the community. Thank you, appreciate that. I'd like to welcome Laura Jackson from Youth Council. Nau mai haere mai anō. Welcome again to...
Kia ora, apologies, I was meant to have another youth councillor coming, but things happen and I don't quite know what. So you've just got me this morning for the first time of many times today, I think. Thank you so much for hearing Youth Council's submission on the Wellbeing strategy. We were really intrigued by the sort of general framework and the direction that this strategy came from. In particular, we wanted to put a major focus on the city safety. You'll see in our submission, we were quite concerned about the statistics that were used in this framework when suggesting that Wellington City was a relatively safe city. We anecdotally have noticed major changes since COVID in the central city safety, and so we were quite concerned about the fact that some of the statistics used were from 2014 to 2019, which feels to be a significantly different time period than what we're living in now. So that was a major concern of ours, and particularly we felt that because the discussion in the submission was quite focused on like, oh, these are the statistics that we're using, it's a safe city. We don't feel that there was as much emphasis put on how to actually address those issues because there was that lack of communication and that error in the judgment there. Beyond that, we were also really concerned about the growing lack of cohesion within the city, particularly in terms of the discrepancies between different community groups and the lack of sort of interaction that those have had, but we were very pleased to see the direction that the council's taking in terms of wanting to address those issues and make sure that that sort of social inequality was being addressed directly. You've already got the rest of the written submission, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Fitzsimons.
Yeah, I'm interested in the point you made about the stats, which I think is a fair one. What would be kind of your expectation of what they would look like now? Obviously, we can't, there's no predictability to that, but just based on your views and what you people discuss, what's your take on where they'd be and what they'd be saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think a large issue with the statistics is the statistics that were referred to were talking about reported police issues. And as a young person, I know, and amongst my colleagues, we're very aware that a lot of young people aren't reporting issues of safety within the central city. That might be a more accurate representation of different sort of groups of people in the city, but for young people, we tend not to report, and that's a whole nother police issue that we won't go into today. But from anecdotes, I would say that the average young Wellingtonian, whether that's a first year coming to the uni or a year 12 or 13 hanging out in the city, at the moment would not feel that Wellington City is a safe area. We've seen that from the protests that we've had over the past few months, the marches. It's just not feeling safe. I mean, I personally live in the centre city. I live very close to here, and I would still Uber 500 metres home rather than walk. And when you're looking at the typical broke uni student, that's not a great option, the fact that you don't feel safe walking home from town, even when you're staying within the centre city. Sure, having to Uber when you're living out in the suburbs, that's totally acceptable, but not feeling safe within the centre city to walk home on even a normal weekday as opposed to a weeknight, that's a big issue. So I think anecdotally, the average young person in Wellington would not feel safe in the city.
Are there any other Pātai councillors? Thank you, Laura. Kia ora. Thank you for time to come and share with us. We haven't got anyone here quite yet. We'll just see if they're in the hallway, maybe. Councillors who are online, we haven't got our next submitter in the room yet, so we're just sitting quietly, resting while we're waiting.
We welcome to Sean.
So Councillor Young's asked me to see if anyone else is going on the Te Kopaho site visit think it's just you and I, Councillor Young.
Oh, so when is that happening?
This Sunday
I've
afternoon.
got a hold in my diary, but I didn't.
It's
I want to. Yeah, I put a hold in
it's
there.
quite weather dependent.
Yeah. I would like to come if it's happening. It sounds amazing. It's okay, I'll do something. I'll be fine. Yeah. So who do I get in touch with it about it? Just up in Dem
Beck.
Services? Beth, okay.
Beck.
Okay.
Beck Ramsey from PSR, Councillor.
Yeah.
Free.
Yes, please. Yes, I've been saving the date.
All right, yes, so no mai haere mai, we've got Alan Platt and Caroline Arrowsmith from Sustainability Trust here, and so welcome to you both. You've got 10 minutes, and if you do have time within that 10 minutes, there might be some questions from councillors.
Yep, cool.
Thank you.
So I push. Do I follow the instruction?
Push.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. Ko Alan Platt, Aho. I'm the Smart Homes Manager at the Sustainability Trust, and I'm here to briefly present on one key part of our submission on the Council's social wellbeing framework. That's the quality of housing. My colleague Carolyn will talk about the community connection section of our submission shortly. If context is anything, it's very strange to see you all in this room. It's really odd. I'm actually quite... it's actually kind of cool. Sustainability Trust congratulates the Council wholeheartedly on their approach to addressing social wellbeing indicators. Housing is critical to social wellbeing. We at the Trust have had first-hand experience of fantastic council support since 2006 in delivering programs aimed at improving housing standards in the city. This has included supporting home energy saver assessments, advice and services, installing insulation, as well as other practical interventions in low-income households. We believe this ongoing work could be extended. We have developed a sound understanding of issues with the rental stock of housing in the city. With the introduction of the healthy housing standards, we do assessments for those. There are many rental houses which will be difficult to get up to the standard for various reasons. Action on these properties often falls between regulation enforcement and subsidy or encouragement. We need to find a balance between the carrot and the stick, and we believe that the Council could be a vital part of that. One potential lever in this action could be a targeted rate. Over the years, this type of scheme has had a bit of a bad rap, mainly due to dropping commercial interest rates and the risks that some councils have been exposed to around the country with their programs. We at the Trust believe there is a place for a well-managed targeted rates scheme to allow capital improvements, for instance, to rental properties that don't encumber the current owner, but also don't unduly reward them with windfall gains as they sell the house. And just one final pitch. Our team at the Trust, led by the inimitable Phil Squire, has been working for some time on overcoming energy hardship in the city. This has become quite a popular talking point in the media recently, but Phil's been working on it for quite a long time. Sustainability Trust is therefore developing an electricity retailer to ensure security of supply and affordable power for low-income homes. We've been advised by one expert that this is, quote, not for the faint-hearted, unquote. But Council will be pleased to note we are not faint of heart. We will be proceeding and we'll keep the Council up to date with developments because there are bound to be fantastic opportunities to invest and support our operation. And now I'll hand over to Carolyn to talk about the community connection.
Morena koutou, ko Caroline Arrowsmith. I'm an educator at Sustainability Trust and I look after our urban agriculture programs. So first off, we'd really like to congratulate Wellington City Council on the development of the Sustainable Food Plan. We'd really like to encourage you to keep going with this and prioritise this work. I work closely with a number of groups passionate about local food production in Wellington and composting. Together, we've been working on a vision for Wellington's food system that brings communities together, creates jobs, enhances our local environment, and helps with people's mental and physical health. There are a number of big issues facing Wellingtonians, which I'm sure you guys, more than anyone, are aware of. And we encourage Wellington City Council to look holistically for solutions rather than dealing with the issues in silos. We'd really like to highlight that community food growing and composting can contribute greatly to the community outcomes of environmental, social, cultural, and economic well-being. It really ticks all the boxes. An example of this is we have collaborated with KaiCycle to get community composting off the ground in Wellington. Some might see composting as a sustainable way of dealing with our food waste, but there are a number of other benefits that we'd really like to highlight. We see these as local job creation, upskilling and education about food systems, and community connection is a really big one. Rather than a big carbon-emitting truck coming and collecting food scraps, which is one potential solution to our food waste woes, community composts in every neighbourhood have the potential to really bring people together to take positive action. Neighbourhoods meeting each other as they drop off their food scraps, for example, and using the compost to grow local food and, of course, local job creation. Similarly, KaiCycle's urban farm in Newtown is not just a place where food is grown. It's open 24/7 for anyone to visit. They have hospital staff members and patients coming to eat their lunch and just relax there. They get so many visitors that their farmers have become more community workers than farmers, and there is such a need in the community for more places for people to connect, and people really love being surrounded by food growing and getting involved. And imagine a KaiCycle in every neighbourhood in Wellington. It would really bring neighbourhoods together, be incredible. Food's an area that affects absolutely everyone. It has the power to bring communities and diverse cultures together, create jobs, and improve mental, physical, and environmental health. It's also clear that there are many people in Wellington that do not have reliable access to healthy food. Food insecurity is a massive issue with many contributing factors, but encouraging and supporting local food production is an important way to both boost local food resilience and empower people to gain some control over their food supply in a dignified manner. In Wellington, we've got a number of projects and activities that are already supported by Wellington City Council, thank you very much, such as a Seeds to Feeds festival, KaiCycle, of course, community composting, you support Sustainability Trust directly with Fruit Tree Guardians and our food growing workshops, and of course the community gardens. But our key message is don't underestimate these projects and the benefits they can bring to all aspects of wellbeing for people in Wellington, and be supportive, bold and innovative. A big argument in Wellington is that there's not enough space for anything, but you know, we've got rooftop gardening, vertical gardening, food, forest, play and recreation areas. There's so much potential in Wellington, and don't waste this opportunity. Cool.
Kia ora, we do have a few pātai. First one is from Councillor Matthews.
Kia ora kōrua. My question is about what you're sort of seeing in the quality of rental housing in Wellington, and what sort of specific actions could you take if we had a broader program to address it?
Right, well, I guess it's a bit of a bell curve. There's some at the very good end, and many landlords sit there. They were quick onto this healthy home standards. They fixed up their houses. There's a big bulge in the middle that are working through now, and a lot of those are property managers who are quite professional, and they handle it all really well, and they work alongside us and other trades to bring houses up to speed, up to scratch. But there is that hardcore nub of difficult houses, and we know they're hard. Anything with a casement wooden window is going to be tricky because it's going to be drafty. Some of these old places are tough. The problem we have is if it's a home owner, we can support them if they're low income, community services card, whatever, we can put some money into that home and that's all fine. But if it's a landlord, nobody really wants to give them money to do it because they're improving their capital value, and so they get a gain out of it at the end. So that's probably the big thing. I think a big part of it will be, sadly, it'll be the regulations, and it'll be administering the regulations and trying to actually inspect these places and make sure that they do come up to speed. We're starting to see now individual landlords who own one house or two houses coming up, and they have not engaged at all with us up till now. They've kind of been in denial. I think they've just realised 1st of July is quite close, and as soon as...
Yeah, it is.
A lot of it's been hidden because tenants don't want to complain because the market's so tight. They know if they complain that there could be a reason to put them out. We don't have a lot of evidence on that, but it's just sort of something you imagine. Sometimes our guys do go and do an assessment in a house, and the tenants get quite nervous because they think that means that they're going to get a heat pump put in and their rent's going to go up, and all these things, bad things might happen. So there's a bit of a problem at that end of the market that I think regulation and maybe some inspections or some or a carrot. And this is why the targeted rates thing could be an option.
Councillor Phone.
Kia ora, and yeah, thank you for all your mahi at the Trust, and just want to acknowledge you, Phil, for coming along. What I wanted to get down, because Georgie spoke about it last time, the targeted rate and that solution. So I think that's a really great opportunity. So what are some key examples that we could go off that have been successful? And are you talking to officers about this at the moment?
Not so much to officers. A really good way, I think, to look at is in Melbourne, in Victoria.
Yep.
Where a private finance business set up, I think that might have been a social enterprise, who basically oversaw this, all the contractual stuff. They sought the finances and they made it all happen. And all the council had to do was actually change the rate bill that went out, and the money got funneled across. That made it a lot less risky for the council, and it enables that loan to be applied to the property, not the person.
Yep.
So when it sells, it stays, and the new ratepayer starts paying that rate. So although you get the benefit of the increased value of the property, you don't see the windfall gain when you sell. So it seems to be. I think the Melbourne example would be a really good one.
A good one. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. He pātai taku anō.
Was it quick?
So just, Caroline, around the food system, and thank you for bringing that kōrero to this kaupapa, what are the two or three key things that council can do to enable this, in your view?
Yep, absolutely. Well, access to land is, of course, a massive barrier. So when we're looking at the Resource Management Act and zoning of the city, keep in mind food growing projects when allocating the land, and know that spaces can be multi-use as well. Kids love playing in food gardens and food forests, for an example. Funding, of course, so keep up the funding of places like KaiCycle and trusting community groups to know what they're doing with that funding when it comes to getting solutions happening, like community composting. And I think, just being key advocates, really, of the mahi and keeping it going rather than being sort of constantly having to argue your case for it. Everyone knows that it's good. Let's get it done. Yeah.
Well, tēnā koroa. Thank you so much for coming in to share your whakaaro with us. We really appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the mahi that you do. Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome Roger Tweedy from Enterprising People. Nau mai, haere mai. Good.
Council yearly. That's good.
Yeah. Keeping to our time slots. It's good to see you, Roger. It's been a wee while.
Yeah, kia ora tātou.
So you know how it works. We've got 10 minutes.
Most faces are familiar, but it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking 40 years involved in the Wellington community, I've never done this before. So this is a first, which probably means that I'm pretty passionate about the topic. So that's why I bothered to come over from the Wairarapa. No, I love coming to Wellington. So a couple of things. The framework is talking about social well-being. A mayor and a council that I also am involved with said that local government in the future will be all about social well-being. That'll be its core role. I'm sure there's a debate to happen on that, but I think this framework is bigger than the social aspects of how it's shaped. And the other aspect, if you listen to the futurists, is the notion, particularly local government New Zealand, of localism. So this also could be a useful tool in that mahi going forward around localism. As I said, I don't often do this, but I think the framework is certainly a fantastic move forward, one of the best bits of work I can remember in my days. It's the proof will be in the implementation, of course, but the framework spells out a way of thinking about council's role or roles. It also, just despite most things that come to you, could be a cost saving for council. It actually, a lot of my colleagues and people that work in the community feel that we let central government off a lot in Wellington. My years working in the unemployment space, council wasn't actually actively involved, wasn't actually drawing on the money that was available and the resources that were available in that space. Wellington's often seen, and we promote that, of course, as a privileged city, highest rate of income, the highest qualification in the country. But we do have problems. We're not all rosy. So that the framework does give a real potential to do that. The graphic in here, I think, I like graphics, with the roles of council is absolutely key one. Finding the page, 19, I think it is, with the various roles. And I'll focus more on this graphic. The provider, funder and regulator are probably pretty okay as far as I'm concerned in clarity. But the bottom ones, the advocate, the facilitator and the partner are the areas that I see massive potential for improvement in. As I mentioned, advocating to central government at all levels. I know some of you around the table spent a lot of time up in the beehive, but I don't think generally as an organisation we are as engaged with central government activity as we could be. Almost every day of the week there's something on in Wellington run by a university or a government agency where I never ever see Wellington City Council officers at. They're not engaged in the bigger picture outside their doors. I often describe council's role as being very paternal rather than actually teaching the kids to fly and take off. And I think council does try and take over things when in fact they're best to get out. So advocacy, I think, is definitely a critical role. The facilitator role is another one that's absolutely essential. Some of you may know I had quite a bit of involvement in the early days of Shelley Bay. What we needed was council to get in as a facilitator. Council got scared and they thought this is going to cost us a lot of money, and it will, and it did. But the reality was their role was to go and bring the parties together. We just ran away from that. So I think the facilitation role is one we underestimate. Whether we've got the skills within the council, I am not sure, but there is definitely some very highly valued facilitators out there in the community. Some of them that are recognised in Australia as the top facilitators live in Wellington. So, we have that role there. And the partnership, I have been heavily involved in those 40 years in community organisations. We just heard from a great example, Sustainability Trust, where the highly professional organisation works in partnership with council. There's a whole lot of those others out there already operating, but also able to, with a bit of help, to lift their capability to be key players. And there's lots of examples where council stepped in to solve a problem rather than taking a partner from the community with them on the journey. So they are the key things I wanted to say. As I said, the proof is going to be in the implementation. I strongly believe that council has a role in building leadership. I did a trip to Portland a couple of years ago and brought back a report which nobody seems to have bothered to read on how they work with building the capacity of the community sector to building leadership, really, not doing it, but building leadership. And those sort of things are critical to it. Another last little one that I'll mention in that roles, I still think there's work to be done on the respective role of councillors and officers. And I see quite a lot of examples of councillors stepping into roles where officers are better skilled and qualified to do, and vice versa, really. So I do think that's a challenge. My job at council as a place-based manager, I used to have councillors, none of them who are there here still, none of them lasted very long actually, who would go to the chief executive complaining about how engaged I was in the community. And that was their role, to be engaged in the community, not an officer, which I found unbelievably stupid. But that was the role. You guys don't even have a job description, I found out in that exercise, so you can really do anything. But I think there is an issue there as to where governance and operations fit. So I'll leave it at that. I think it's a marvellous report. I commend the officers involved in doing it. I think it's wider than just the community's part of council, its application, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, kia ora, Roger. We do have a pātai from Councillor Foon.
She's got all the questions.
Kia ora, Roger, and welcome. Good to see you. Just could you please give me a couple of examples on the partnership opportunity and where we could have been better at being a partner in a more hands-off way rather than stepping up our responsibility or ownership of a situation?
Yeah, one that was a wee way back, but it was when Councillor Eagle was a councillor, and he was also, I think, on the board of Volunteering New Zealand, and he had this wonderful idea of creating Wellington as a city that values volunteers and seeing that as one of its big, value points over others. He involved some strategy people. He didn't involve the community section of council at all. He didn't involve the Volunteer Wellington or any of the agencies involved. It was well-meaning, but it just went a lot of money in a launch and it went flat because nobody was engaged in that process. Volunteer Wellington, which is one of my babies, of course, has got the capability to do a hell of a lot more in the city than they are currently doing, if only council sort of understood that they are good at that as their expertise. They don't need to try and replicate that within the council. So there's a raft of other examples. The setting up of the Kia ora Newtown Centre, which was in response to complaints from the community. Council leapt in. They chose a very good officer to run it, but it actually could have been done much more integrated with the community and much more with the establishment organisations like the Newtown Community Centre and others. So lots of examples here.
Oh, kia ora, Roger. That's all the questions on the list. Thank you for making your way over to share your experience and your knowledge with us. Thank you, Roger.
Yes.
No mai haere mai, Claire Teal from Volunteer Wellington. Welcome, Claire. So you've got 10 minutes and there may be some questions in that time. Kia ora. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko te ahumairangi te puki, ko te whanganui ātara te whanga, ke te puna tautoko o e mahi ana, ko Claire Teal tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone, my name is Claire Teal and I'm here today representing Volunteer Wellington somewhat opportunistically after the end of Roger's time. Thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly with you today about Volunteer Wellington's thoughts on the social wellbeing framework. I've never made an oral submission before. When I spent some time with Google looking for tips and tricks around how to do a good one, I read about bringing home the strong points by using either humour or shock value, which did get my imagination going. But the thing is, the perspective I'm sharing today is neither funny nor shocking. It's in fact such a fundamental part of our city's life that we often don't even notice it's there or how much we depend on it. And that right there, well, that's my point. Volunteering and volunteer involving organisations could be said to be the almost invisible elements that move social wellbeing from a good idea to a happening reality. At Volunteer Wellington, we understand that the framework is a high-level tool and not a strategy for action. We know that it's not the intent of the document to lay out plans.
However, on page 8, it is stated that part of the purpose of this framework is to acknowledge the many groups that make up Wellington City and explore key issues that affect the wellbeing of our people. And given that, we feel it's appropriate to raise the issue of the kind of volunteering-shaped hole that's currently present in the framework. And to quickly summarise from our written submission and echo the contribution made by Volunteering New Zealand as well, it's now impossible to deny the profound impact that volunteering has on the volunteers' wellbeing. And when we encourage people to explore contributing to the city via volunteering, we simultaneously encourage them into an activity that supports their physical health, their mental health, their sense of purpose, their feeling of belonging to and investment in their community, their social relationships, the list goes on. For this reason, we feel that volunteering should be an absolutely central aspect of any focus on social wellbeing, and under that advocate role, Council could be promoting involvement in volunteering as a key avenue to social wellbeing. Where do these volunteers go to donate their time? Well, into one of Wellington's incredible community organisations. And these organisations need to be noted, and not just because they host all the well-beings who are doing the volunteering. No, they need to be noted because, to be frank, they come up with the ideas and they scramble for the funding and they staff the teams and ultimately provide the services and supports to communities that enable the achievement of the social wellbeing framework. And yes, we know this is moving into strategy, not high-level roles. But how can the framework be a document that, quote, acknowledges the many groups that make up Wellington if it only mentions in passing the primary group of organisations that will bring the framework to life, like on pages 9 and 14? And how does this fit into the council roles hexagon diagram on page 18? Partner. It fits in partner. It's a bit like with this framework and the focus on wellbeing, we're building a house. Except in the framework as it stands, there's some vital bits missing from the house, like walls. Because even in its format as a high-level tool, we could call it a roof, for use in determining the council's role in improving social wellbeing, it's basically impossible to achieve any of it without extensive input from Wellington's community organisations. Just as it gets tricky for the walls to stand without the funding and planning support we get from council, a roof is basically a skate ramp without the walls holding it up. In principle, we at Volunteer Wellington think it is great that Wellington City Council is engaging with the facets of social wellbeing, and we're proud to be part of a city that prioritises the wellbeing of all people. And we would like to encourage Council to make some additions. We suggest 3. 1, the undeniable impact volunteering has on all aspects of wellbeing should be specifically stated. If nothing else, this is a nod to the thousands of people in Wellington who devote their time to literally keeping people and their wellbeing ticking. 2, Council's dependence on volunteer involving organisations for achievement of all the framework's aspects is specifically included. And 3, organisations such as Volunteer Wellington devote a massive amount of time to supporting volunteer involving organisations working in the social wellbeing space across Wellington. We know our members and we know the environment they're working within really, really well. We have offered our knowledge and our expertise to Council as a willing strategic partner and collaborator. If this had been taken up and we were valued as a source of expertise and strategic insight, maybe volunteering and community organisations would have had that rightful place in the framework. Growing a city of truly well-beings takes the contribution of all of us. We look forward to working with a council that steps more deeply into strategic partnership with volunteer involving organisations to enable a cohesive, collaborative response to making these goals reality in our awesome little city. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Claire. That was a very concise submission. Councillors, are there any partai? I think it was, you've really laid it out quite clearly for us. So thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do, and the work that volunteers do. We do, as councillors, get to see a lot of that. So thank you. Councillor Foon, did you have a question? Yeah.
I just want to press in a little bit to understand the journey you've had with. So can I take it from your submission you've tried working with council on a strategic partnership? Yeah, and that hasn't flourished in any way?
No, and I totally respect that there is a lot on people's plates, and in changeover of personnel and busyness, things can fall between the cracks. But it has certainly been something that for many years of Volunteer Wellington, we have been trying to kind of say, hey, we as a kind of a helicopter organisation who can see quite broadly across the city and has deep relationships with our members, we can bring a level of insight to things like this and other strategic work that the council's doing, and yet just has never really got its wheels. So that's something that we hope we will be able to make happen. Yeah.
Are there any key actions that you see we could take to enable this conversation at least?
Oh gosh,
maybe have the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. But thank you for your question on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Well, kia ora, Claire. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and kōrero with us today, and for the mahi you do.
Thank you very much.
Kia ora. I'll know my haere mai anō Lynn Caden-Head, who's here to talk to us from our Environment Reference Group.
Yet again.
Thank you.
Kia ora. It's a great idea to have a framework. Whoever dreamt that one up, it's a good document, and I don't always say that. And it's really good if you can be more systematic about decision making. That's always a great idea. What it needs is the ability to add other issues. There's the 5 key issues are fine, but as we know, the world's changing. I don't know what other issues might be, but it needs that ability without having to rewrite it or go back out for consultation to add both other key issues and also more minor issues and use the framework. So quite a minor point. There's a diagram, I think it's on page 12, well it was on my computer, this diagram here, very distinctive, which is basically good except between box 1 and 2, it needs the bottom bullet point from the second box put up in there, which is, does the council have a role? And is it provider, funder, partner, da-da-da-da-da-da? Because if the answer to that question is no, then you don't continue through the framework. So that question is at the bottom of the second box, and there's no point. The question is a sensible question, and there are things that, well, the question's there for a reason. There are things that come up that the council doesn't have a role. I'm not going to name one, but there are things. So, that just needs to be flipped up from there into the space with a yes/no, and then I think it's good. And we'd actually also like this sort of framework to be applied to other things, like starting with biodiversity, because it's nice and short. Like our natural capital is a humongous document that needs revision, but a nice, short, concise document is much more manageable, and a framework. So not delving down into too much detail, but this is the procedure that we're going to follow to make a decision. And it also makes it easier, I think, especially if all the councillors agree on the framework, to work together. But you may not agree on it, but it's a pretty high-level, basic, systematic document. So that's actually all I've got to say. So I think well done for whoever thought it up and to the council officers.
Kia ora, Lynn. Thank you. Councillors, are there any partai? I think you've been very clear in your summary, and thank you for your feedback and taking the time to come and share that with us. It's very helpful.
Anytime.
Thank you. Kia ora, Lynn.
Thank you.
All right, Councillors, we now have a break until 10:50. So if you want to have some morning tea and have a stretch, I'd like to begin by welcoming Manjeet Gruel from the Wellington Interfaith Council, and I think, Manjeet, you might have some other people who are going to come up with you. They're welcome too. Nau mai, haere mai, tēnā koutou. So you know how this works. It's 10 minutes and there might be some questions. There should be enough chairs if you want to pull some of the other ones around.
I'll sit here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, and the timer is just up there if you want to see how long you've got.
Right.
And thank you.
Thank you. Morning, councillors. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Morning again. With me today, I have members of the executive, plus also supporters at the back. So if we were to bring them all up, we may have to occupy your space. So we'll leave that out, you know. So behind me is our spiritual support. There's the Reverend, Stephen King, Abhishek and Shabnam. And with me is David, Pushpa, Jocelyn, and Kumar. Instead of reading out the prepared statement that we had done, we thought we'll just circulate it, and I will make some points, and my colleagues can add to that. And then we'll take any questions that you have. The first point I'd like to make is there is religious diversity. It exists. You can see it on this table. Somebody from the Jewish faith, a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Sikh, a faith group called Sai Group. And behind me, you have Shabnam, who's a Muslim. We are here, and we are not going to disappear. Point number one. Point number two, like all other diversities, in any policy of inclusiveness, we have to be included. You cannot tell me that we'll take the Indian part of you, we'll take the Sikh part of you out. No, I come as a whole package. So in building this policy of inclusiveness, which is one of the primary focus of this new policy, we think you have to include the religious diversity groups as well, the faith groups as well. Now, what does that mean? Now, if you look at the rainbow community, what kind of support have you given to the rainbow community? You support them financially, you support them by giving patronage, you support them by giving advertisement, you support them by telling this city welcomes them. You got to do the same with the faith groups if you want to have them included. You cannot have a policy which differentiates, or in this case, in this diversity, we will deal with it in this manner, and this diversity will deal with it in a different manner. No. Now, why do I make that statement? The reason why I make that statement, councillors and chair, is because there is a fundamental issue between state and church. We need to shift that barrier so that there is some understanding that today the context of religion, the context of faith has to be looked in broader terms. We cannot say just because we are a secular state, we don't want to have an engagement with religious communities. The one factor that binds all faith groups is the interfaith. We bring all the interfaith groups together. You don't have to just deal with silos of different faith groups. You can deal with us. That is why the interfaith exists. The third point that I like to make is your measurements for measuring inclusiveness. Yeah. Oh. Two measures particularly, social connectedness and volunteering. These are two international measures which are used also by Stats New Zealand to measure your well-being. Now you look at social connectedness. The church, many of us for generations, not only today, for generations have been with the church. Reverend King was telling me their records go back 100 years ago. People get patched and dispatched from the church. And this is not only for this generation, previous generations as well. So the relationships that are developed at the church or at faith groups are important in your measurement. The second factor is volunteering. And I have given a quote from international studies where it has shown that the possibility and the probability of people who are faith groups volunteering is much higher. And people who do charity work also come largely from the faith groups. And if you look at the Wellington City, whether you look at City Mission, whether you look at Soup Kitchen, they were once upon a time religious based. The operation of the free store at St. Peter's is related to the church. So we can, and what does religion teach? Religion teaches good values, good citizenship, good behavior, not otherwise. And those are the measures of well-being that you want. The final point that, I'm looking at time 4 minutes ago, the final point I'd like to make is the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch massacre. They have made 2 specific recommendations, which I thought I'll bring up here. There are 44 recommendations, but to us, very specific to us. Recommendation 36 and recommendation 37. 36 says, invest in your young people and teach them, get them aware of the religious diversity. Question to you is, have you done that? Have we done that as a community? Recommendation 37 is to have communication with the wider public on, among others, religious diversity. Those have been adopted by government. And I think it's incumbent on us, incumbent on this city, to also implement those recommendations. We had applied under a different organization for a grant from you, from the City Council, to do the We Are One session. It was declined. Ask yourself, since March 2019, how many times have you communicated with faith groups? Yes, I've gone to ND, we are doing the blessings here every month, but besides that, where has been the engagement with us? And why not? It's time to ask those hard questions. Thank you. Would you like to add?
Just 2 points. In terms of if you're really looking for social cohesion or social inclusion or whatever terminology you like to call for your city, you cannot ignore person as a whole. You cannot divide a person. We come, as Manjeet said, we come as a package, right? And you need to look at our total well-being, not only mental well-being or social well-being. Number 2, this is your great opportunity to include this into a policy statement, to have that acknowledged. We're not asking you the moon, we're simply asking you to acknowledge our existence, acknowledge our contribution, and provide us support if and when we need it. We've been operating for 40 years, almost 40 years, Interfaith Council here. We have operated and will continue to operate. It's up to you to use us as your strength or to put us aside. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora, Manjeet and friends. I had a question about interfaith spaces. So throughout the city, in different suburbs, are there big gaps in spaces where people of different faith can come and meet? Is it good in the central city but not as good as Johnsonville or Strathmore? Or
If you look at the last point on our statement, and I think in November of last year, when we met with the mayor, we had raised this and we were requested to make a request, and we have done so. The city needs interfaith space. We borrowed the church, the garden room of St. Peter's. And if I may also say, if you want to see how inclusiveness works, go to St. Peter's. Spend one day there. They have been welcoming us so much. You'll see Muslims coming down there, doing activities. It's a church, Anglican church. They are going to do something for Matariki on the 20th. They want interfaith prayer. So, yes, we do need, but we also need people like the Anglican Church, St. Peter's Church.
Well, tēnā koutou. Our time has run out now, but thank you so much for all coming in to share with us. It's really important that we hear from you, so thank you. Kia ora. So now, Manjit, you probably want to stay because you're going to be speaking to us from ECTA, New Zealand.
I'll move this side.
Kia ora.
Let me introduce. I introduce. Can I introduce my colleague who will do this session? Abhishek. Abhishek is currently the ECTA's coordination for projects, and you need to do your talk now, Abhishek.
Thank you, Manjit. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for acceding to our request to speak at this meeting. I'm Abhishek Sharma, an executive committee member / projects coordinator at ECTA New Zealand. And with me is Ms. Shabnam Tariq and Manjit Grewal, a founder member of ECTA. So I would like to make a short statement in support of ECTA's submission on the social well-being framework strategy. And we will take questions after that, if needed. So, hang on, move that. ECTA New Zealand is a Wellington-based not-for-profit organisation based in Wellington. We are a registered charity and were established in 2017. As you can see, our objectives dovetail very much with the intentions of the proposed well-being framework proposed by the Council. So our underpinning principles of ECTA is to empower through knowledge and capacity management, confidence and identity growth, facilitating interactions with the larger community within Wellington. And our key weekly activity is free food distribution, where we do the cooked meal free food distribution in 3 different parts of Wellington, which is Wellington City Centre, Lower Hutt, and Pororua. So, and 5 times a week, we do the bread distribution to various parts of the Wellington region again, all the way from Moira, Pororua, Tawa, Linden Community Centre, Shelley Bays. And once a week, we have an operation of the Dea Ethnic Food Bank, where we do provide groceries to the ethnic groups.
If I may add to the reason why we are focusing on this, the segment that we are looking here is only the vulnerable community of Wellington, the needy community of Wellington, and how to look after their well-being, and how to integrate them, assimilate them, and bring them into the mainstream. So our focus in this discussion will be only for that group of people. So the context is that. Yeah. Just on the bread, I just went this morning to deliver 7 containers of bread. No, so okay. Okay.
Yes. So during our free food distribution. We, on regular basis, on average, have interactions with around 250 regular beneficiaries from our various point of distribution, Wellington, Pororua, and Lower Hutt.
And it is important to understand that what we are going to share is on the basis of information we have collected from these interactions that we have had on a weekly basis with this about 200 plus people. It's not only our opinions, but it's also based on what we have heard, seen, and felt.
Yes, so considering City Council's social well-being strategy, ECTA is in agreement with the social well-being policy which has been laid out, but in the longer term, the policy should be designed in a manner where these people are able to look after themselves, at least as far as their daily food needs are concerned. And this is where ECTA's observations for the vulnerable and needy is that they need to transition from the streets to their own mana. And I would ask Manjeet to, so one more. So the objectives are right in their sense to meet which is resilience and inclusivity. But the reality is, I will ask Manjeet to explain a little bit more and elaborate on the reality check for the vulnerable.
The objective of the well-being policy, the framework that you've done, I think are wonderful, are great. The two elements that we need to focus on when we are talking the vulnerable is resilience and inclusivity. How do we include and make them mainstream? Not that remain on the fringes. Now let's look and see what have we done to date. And I'm talking again from ECTA's perspective and what we have heard. Let me ask some hard questions. How often have your officials engaged with these people? How often have they walked the streets and met with them? Councillor Jill, you came once with us, and you saw what you saw. And we do that every week. How often have our cultural and social groups that get council funding, include these people in the activities? It's ratepayers' money that has been spent. Have they made an effort or encouraged these people? Please come. They are on the streets. They are there. We'll give them food. We'll give them some things. And they remain on the street. They remain on the fringe. They will not become mainstream until we make effort to bring them into the mainstream. And the issue is not only homelessness. The issue is giving back their dignity to them, giving back their identity to them, making them feel that they're useful, making them feel that they can contribute to the community. And that responsibility is both the civic organizations in this city and also the responsibility of government, including the city government. Those are the questions. Let me share with you our experience. Councillor Jill, you know this guy. This is Franket's Park. This is November 2019. This is where he was living. I had a full recorded interview. He lived there until we put him into a DCM, community law, ECTA got him into a house. Then what happens next? He came to us with a proposal. Hey, let's do something for others. Tell them how to build their resilience. We said, yes, let's do it. We need money. Let's go to the council. Council will understand this. 2 times we came. He came as well, presented to you guys. Answer, declined. Is this how we do building of the resilience? We ask you. The point that we are trying to make, you go on to the next slide. The point that we are trying to make is good intentions, but you got to implement it. And for implementation, you need to do some soul searching. Do we honestly want to bring them into the mainstream? Or do we want to give them some token feeds and say, thank you very much, here you are, have a blanket from us, have a meal from us, have a house from us? Or do you want to make them useful people of our society? Those questions, I think, you need to ask. And do you have enough caliber within you, in your officers, to do it? Are they willing to do it? And I want to share with you our personal experience, Ekta's personal experience. We have been giving food out. We used to do it from Courtney Place, in front of Reading Cinema. One day we go down there, the place is boarded up. We come to you and say, hey, listen, can I have a space? We will try, can you suggest something? Yes, we suggested something. We say, find us a permanent place where we can do it. Nothing came about. We found a corner in that place. We started giving from there. That was December. Today is June. 2 weeks ago, the shop in front on which we are giving out food, it starts operating. And the guy says, please, good work, but not in front of my shop. We come to the council. Can you help? Can you get a space? Oh, we will try. Saturday, we are giving food. Friday, I call up and say, I have no choice but to use the front of the new building that you have opened up, to use that space to give out food. Until today, I've not gotten an answer. We are part of you. We want to do things. Help us. We can't do it without you. So we have not come here to complain. We have come here to put reality in that these are very good intentions. But these good intentions can only come to fruition if we have officers, we have civic organizations, we have a partnership. And that partnership, Ekta is prepared to offer. I have 9 seconds to take a question.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think we've run out of time, Manjit, for questions on that because we've got other people waiting to do the submissions. Sure. But thank you so much for coming in to share with us and for the mahi that you do. Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Thank you.
No mai haere mai, Jocelyn O'Kane from Vincent's Art Workshop, Inc. Kia ora, Jocelyn. Thank you. So Jocelyn, you've got 10 minutes, and if there's time, we'll have some questions.
Thank you. I have Sarah Porter with me from Vincent's. We're from the Governance Committee. A few familiar faces around the table, but a few we don't know, so we wanted to come and say hi. And put Vincent's in a bit of a context too, in terms of mental health, mainly. So we've got some brochures that they're coming around, that give you just an idea of the colour and the variety that Vincent's offers. And we contribute to community events as well. Can I just give me one? But I also want to say that we have 3-year funding for Vincent's, which has been absolutely marvellous. And a couple of years ago, right at the end of the year, we were asked from the City Council if we'd like a bit more money, because there wasn't much happening in the central city with the closure of the library. So we were given $60,000 to extend our hours. And so if you open up the brochure and you see in the middle that Vincent, such as Vincent's Economy, that they've stickered over the hours with the extensions. So we were lucky enough to get another 60K last year to keep going, but we didn't know until 2 weeks before the money was due to be allocated. So thank you so much for the money. It's really hard sometimes to kind of keep it all going evenly, and I appreciate that we're funded in a way that other people aren't. So the other thing I wanted to say is that Vincent's has been going since '85, and we were well set up by these fabulous community workers, and we haven't deviated from our kaupapa because it's always there, our need is there, and it's growing, of course, because of how things are. But in the time that it's been growing, because it happened at a time when the places like Porirua Hospital and Kimberley closed, lots of small community groups picked up the slack. They were small little community initiatives that, come on with the names, Mash Trust. There were a whole lot of things that started to happen around that time and through the 90s. And then they started to get swallowed up. And so the hospital boards wanted to, and the government contractors wanted to contract with big single entities. So little places couldn't exist anymore. So Vincent's is one of the few places that survived on its own, kind of cobbling together what we can, because it's vibrant and it's wonderful and it fills this fabulous need. So having said that, I'd like to pass you over to Sarah, who can talk about that.
Kia ora, everybody. I'm Sarah, and I stumbled across Vincent's in the early 90s as a young, lost, struggling person. And I found Vincent's to be quite an extraordinary space where I originally went in there looking for a sewing machine that I could use, and then found that it was an amazing art space where there was free materials and space where you could make and do anything you wanted. And what happened for me was really phenomenal, and I was able to make art and heal some things that had gone on for me that had left me really quite broken and quite lost and struggling with what I'd been told was incurable mental illness and addiction, but for which the conventional treatments and support that were offered to me were not helpful and actually quite harmful. But what I found happened at Vincent's was that I found a way to process some things that were unspeakable through the process of art, and also gained through that process an identity of being an artist, which was incredibly useful to me at that time. And I realised years later, after I had achieved some quite amazing success and achievements and had a management role and was sent on some leadership training, and they asked me to plot high points and low points in my life, and I realised that actually my time at Vincent's had been profoundly important in terms of my own healing and growth and development. And I've subsequently come back to Vincent's, and I'm supporting the organisation as part of the management committee, because I think Vincent's provides a really important piece of the puzzle for the social wellbeing and mental health of the community by providing a space that's open access where anybody can come and use the creative process for self-development and healing and creative expression, which is incredibly powerful and is actually a really great way for people to be able to actually learn about and heal ourselves from all kinds of things which are otherwise dogging us in life. And just to also concur with what Jocelyn has said, there has been a massive push for the last 15 years at least to get small organisations to merge together and become part of larger organisations. And Vincent's is one of the last remaining small organisations, but I feel it's an incredibly important and vibrant part of the Wellington community that really offers a lot. And so thank you for your ongoing support of this incredibly important little gem in Wellington's crown.
Cheers, thanks for that. And the other thing to say is that Sarah works for one of those large organisations and it's incredibly stressful, and they're just about to be restructured again, you know. So.
Tēnā korua, and we do have a pātai from Councillor O'Neill.
Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Got a question from Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Jocelyn and Sarah, for your really real words. I note in the submission you talked a little bit about residents observing crisis behaviour or drug and alcohol harm and things like that, and I just wondered what other social networks or social support you're connected with, or do you feel like you're well connected to DCM and those other organisations that can help with that?
It's part of the overall network, I guess. we're not so much connected. We're fairly independent, but we do have those connections to support people as they're needed. I'm aware you came recently and bought some oxen, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the Chinese astrology. Yeah, so this is the year of the oxen. We've got a lot of oxen. People aren't really into oxen.
Love oxen.
But some of them are quite cute.
Very cool.
I've got a question from Councillor Fitzsimons.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and thank you for the really important work that you do. Can you just give us an insight into what you're seeing as we've come out of lockdown and the implications of COVID and what's happening in the city? Have you noticed anything different or in terms of the people that come to Vincent's?
Yes, would you? Yeah.
At Vincent's and more broadly in mental health, there has been a massive increase in the level of distress in the broader community. There's been, because as I'm sure you would have heard, because there's been fairly constant media attention to the pressure that's on mental health services more broadly, but there's been a huge and steep rise in people who are presenting for the first time ever in need of services and support, as well as the increase in need and demand from people who had previously been engaged with services. And that's certainly been the case for Vincent's as well. There's been a lot more of that, and also because around Vincent's there's a lot of student residences, and so we've had also, surprisingly, a massive increase in people from the student population who've wanted to access Vincent's and be able to make use of that space as a way of working through their anxieties and distress as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've got a question from Councillor Foon.
Kia ora, and thank you for the amazing mahi you've been doing in Wellington for so long. So what is it specifically that council could help to really support and enable? Is it continued funding, or is it also, what else could be done to bring you in as part, make sure that you're part of the fabric of social wellbeing fabric in Wellington?
Funding's a constant, of course, and we do have the capacity to become more than we are. And we would like to do that. We're a bit of a crossroads. We've had a fabulous coordinator who's been there for over 20 years and been a hero for Vincent's and a Wellington institution, who's coming to the end of her time, and that's opportunities for Vincent's to go forward in a new way, and we're aware that we're going into a transition stage at this point. I think Vincent's strength is the fact that it stays an art studio. And it connects in with so many other things. But having said that, I was with one of the artists, or a couple of the artists from Vincent's the other day, and we were doing a bit of a garden project. And suddenly one of the women said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a Vincent's that had an indoor and an outdoor space so that we could garden there and we could have meals there? And I suddenly thought of that bowling club in Owen Street and thought, yeah, wouldn't that be marvellous? But to do something like that would just be absolutely huge, and there's probably a huge call for places like that. I'm looking down there at you, Iona, when Innermost Gardens set up, remember, and what happened in that time. So there's huge possibilities to be doing things, but as for Vincent's, just to stay as it is its best thing. Cheers.
O tēnā koroa. Thank you, Jocelyn and Sarah, for the mahi that you do and for coming to share with us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Cheers, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Nau mai, haere mai, Toby Burke. Kia ora, Toby. Thank you for coming in to kōrero with us. So you've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for reading my submission. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Sometimes we've got to jump our heads into your submission, so if you can maybe give us a few things.
I can't recall everything I wrote either because I don't have a copy of it, and I did 3 submissions on 3 different topics, but there was a bit of overlap and connection. But wellbeing is the broadest one, so.
Sure. Councillor Fitzsimons has a question.
I'm just looking at your submission, and you've raised issues around alcohol and gambling and harm reduction, but also about positive ageing. Are there any things that you want to say about those particular aspects? I thought they were 3 quite broad areas put into one comprehensive paragraph.
Well, I have recently become involved with Salvation Army in Newtown with their bridge program support. They have a recovery group on Thursday evenings, and they do a lot to help people recover from alcohol and drugs, and just help people recover in general from past trauma, and and they rely completely on public donations. So they do great work, but there is a huge need out there, which would be great, if that support could grow. They do some help with gambling too. The other positive ageing. Yes. I'm probably my connection to that is I've worked in aged care, so that's when I kind of really just saw the reality of so that's a big need. They do have a program also in the Salvation Army trying to help elderly people, people that might be lonely or things like that. And there are some other groups around, but I'm hoping to volunteer in the future some stage in that area, hopefully. But thank you.
We've got a question from Councillor Matthews.
So I just had a bit of a refresh on your submission. So you talk about non-smoking spaces. So that's quite an interesting. We've been having a conversation about, wanting to encourage outdoor dining, but and I think some councils are very keen that it all be smoke-free. But we've had a bit of pushback from the hospitality industry. So what that it's a hard time. We appreciate that. So is that the sort of thing that you would support us doing? Making more smoke-free outdoor dining.
I used to smoke myself, and I've had family members pass away at an early age from smoking, and they do have quite progressive laws in Australia regarding pretty much all outdoor restaurants and cafes, including the footpath areas, are smoke-free now in Australia under their laws. So they're quite progressive in that area. So I think we could learn a lot from some of those. And it is something that a lot of people that smoke really want to quit, and they find it hard. So just having the encouragement is a big thing. It does help. And there are thankfully a lot more alternatives now to help people get off. Like people can get free gums and lozenges and patches. And there's vaping, which is much less harmful and cheaper and things like that. So, and just, for health and safety of everyone, including children, and definitely. Health is always going to come first above, anything.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I was just looking at, it looks like you've submitted twice, which is excellent because we get twice as amount of opinions from you. And the other submission, you talk about non-alcohol spaces and support for AA meetings and things like that. I'm curious, I'm doing a bit of work with the Sea Lion boat, which was a no-alcohol space in Wellington. Can you identify other venues or spaces which are no alcohol and operate pretty well in Wellington, or is it kind of just like private events?
I'm sure there are some. I couldn't name them specifically right now off the top of my head, but and I've heard of a case, I'm not sure if this was in Wellington, but a restaurant where the manager had recovered from alcohol problems, and he decided to make his restaurant alcohol-free, and his business actually improved dramatically. So, I think a lot of it is just fear from business owners sometimes, but in reality, healthy choices, are more popular. People live longer, so they're going to be around longer to purchase more. So, it's common sense, really.
Well, tēnā koe Toby, thank you for coming in to kōrero with us about this one. Thank you. All right, councillors, so now we are going to vote on these submissions. So this is item 2.1, which was the social wellbeing framework hearings. So I'm going to move the motion. Is there a seconder for these hearings? Deputy Mayor Free, thank you. And so is there any debate? Councillor Pennant.
No debate, Madam Chair, apart from obviously thanking the submitters. Just wondering in terms of the process about how we will make a response to submitters. I presume the report will address some of the issues that have been raised, but it'll just be good to think about how we feed back to them.
The staff are here and listening, and this all feeds into the final report. So obviously, if there's specific things that need to be followed up, then I'm imagining that staff can instigate that. But,
and just also from a political perspective too, just how we maybe just something
that's up to us when the report comes.
The point being that we have been challenged on a few things, and I just think it would be good to think about how we collectively respond. That's good.
Yes, yeah, and that's what we do when we receive the report. Is there any further debate? No. So I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, press 1. Those against, press 2. And Jenny's yes. And Councillor Rush. Can't see Councillor Rush. Yes, yes. Good. So that's carried. Thank you. What we're going to do now is we've got item 2.2, which is alcohol fees bylaw hearings, and we've just got one submitter here today, which is Hospitality New Zealand. So no mai, haere mai, Adam Parker, if you'd like to come up and join us. And so you've got 10 minutes, and it's possible there might be some questions within that time if there is room. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Thanks for the opportunity to allow us to speak to our submission this morning, councillors. We appreciate it. Today I've got Ian Bamber from Kapura, who's also the Vice President of our Wellington branch for Hospitality New Zealand. In 2019, Hospitality New Zealand raised concerns around Council's lack of transparency and accountability when it came to providing rationale for the increase in licensing fees. 2 years later, we now find ourselves in the same position. If Council feels that the current alcohol expenditure is wholly justified, then we would expect some sort of clear communication to those affected. And when I talk about clear communication, I'm not saying the consultation document wasn't clear communication, but there was a lack of expenditure breakdown in the council document, which we requested 2 years ago. We got the document, which was all good, but then obviously I think from feedback from our members, they would just prefer to be told what the expenditure breakdown actually was, so they knew what they were expected to pay for. Many of our members' businesses have closed their doors in 2020 due to the pandemic, and at present, hospitality industry has huge issues with resourcing, staff issues, and never-ending compliance costs. Even in a pre-COVID environment, the alcohol licensing costs are just one of the ever-rising suite of compliance costs that hospitality businesses face. I'm sure you all know what the costs are, but just to list them off: minimum wage increases, commercial rates which are increasing a monstrous scale in 2021, building warrant fitnesses, food control plan annual fees, which include grease trap fees, template verification fees, and independent evaluator costs, duty manager certificates, approved evacuation schemes, public liability insurance, outdoor seating and sandwich board fees. The list goes on. By increasing the alcohol licensing fees, in addition to a huge commercial rate increase for 2021, and all the aforementioned compliance costs, Council will no doubt put the nail in the coffin for some CBD businesses. We're also concerned that there was nowhere in the proposal document does it state that any alternative options for reaching the recovery costs, were investigated. We're under the impression, and we're not exactly blind to the fact that the Sale and Supply of Liquor Act definitely outlines that alcohol licensing the user should pay, in a sense. But this doesn't mean to say that the associated costs should go unchecked, spared from assessment, cost-benefit analysis, or review. Costs that are more than income should probably be considered to Council as an overspend of budget, not as a shortfall of income. Those are my main points from the submission. Ian, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I represent two bodies here, really. Kapora, who are a fairly large organisation within Wellington and outside now. We're absolutely concerned that Wellington needs to maintain its vibrancy, and the risk for us is that there are ground floor sites in Wellington that could become vacant and could increase our risk with this and the other costs that are imposed on us. I think the open and transparency comment that Adam made is absolutely vital for us to be able to understand the process. There's a lot of frustration within our industry around the red tape that surrounds getting licenses, reissuing licenses, managers' certificates, etc. And there are plenty of examples around the country with other councils taking modern approaches to reducing some of those costs. I think an open and transparent view of how those costs accrue and how they're passed on to us is something that we'd like to see and help you improve the systems that you currently have to reduce your costs and therefore make it easier to reach that 85%.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any questions?
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. And look, I am sympathetic to the fact that there are lots of costs coming on. It's just, I guess, the burden is who pays for that cost, because if we don't recover, then the ratepayer has to, obviously. And I guess there is a big challenge around alcohol harm and the damage that it does. So if you could just talk a little bit further about, that equity around the distribution of costs, and also whether you feel that the hospitality industry really is lifting its game in terms of alcohol harm, understanding that there are other players too that need to do their bit.
I can speak to the second point if you want to speak to a business perspective.
Yeah, I think we fully understand the recovery of costs, and we think it's right. I mean, it's our business. We're a business, and we're all businesses, and we make money out of the sale of alcohol and food and entertainment and a whole load of other things. But we understand that there's a cost involved in that, and we're quite happy to be paying the 85% to cover those costs. And I think the reality is, and I'm saying this for myself, and I'm probably going away from the company line and the Souther line of HNZ, but I think we'd be happy to pay the 100%, because I read all the submissions and there are plenty of people who are saying you should be paying the 100%. But we can't understand that unless we know exactly what's gone into those costs and what the processes are. And I think when it comes to alcohol harm, we're trying to do a lot of things around this. There's the Courtney Place. We're working with those areas, and that's probably one of the biggest areas where there is probably the most harm. And we're trying to do what we can. And there's lots of incurred costs in doing that, in training, developing staff. We've got a large increase of untrained staff coming into our industry because we've no longer got the opportunity of bringing people in, skilled people in on visas. So there's a training part to that. And we're also implementing some things on Courtney Place now that will incur costs that will help us manage harm across a wide variety of venues. And I think what I see, and having worked all around the world in hospitality, is that we're actually quite a really solid group of individual owner-operators who work together really well. And in this city, actually, we work better than any other place I've ever worked in terms of the hospitality industry. We're not antagonistic. We don't work against each other. We actually work really well with each other. And I think that's a real opportunity for this city to continue to grow the hospitality sector, which brings in a huge amount of revenue to our city. We understand alcohol harm comes along with that, and we're working pretty hard to make sure that we keep people safe in our city. And I think open transparency with our industry around licensing and reducing some of the red tape would help us become better and at all of those things.
And excuse me, just on the alcohol harm reduction, we, as an organisation, Hospitality New Zealand, you may have seen us working directly with council to reduce that, and also the sexual harm prevention campaigns. We're doing everything that we possibly can, but at the end of the day, we can train our venues as much as possible to become compliant, and we do. Trust me, we do. But there are non-members of our organisation out there that don't want to participate in that, and not everyone should be penalised with extra alcohol licensing, increased fees, just for those minority. That's the way that I feel, and I don't even drink alcohol.
I do.
Councillor Foon.
Thank you, Adam. That's a really good point. So what percentage would you guesstimate of establishments in Wellington are part of Hospitality New Zealand?
The majority. The majority, I would probably say, without actually having any figures in front of me, probably between 75-80%. I mean, there are the remaining organisations are probably part of the Restaurant Association. That's just a hunch. I don't know what they do in terms of trying to prevent alcohol-related harm. We have meetings with police all the time to try and come up with strategies to help prevent this. I don't know how much you guys see of that. Yeah, I figured that. Not the harm, not the harm. What we're doing to try and prevent that. But yeah, a good portion of them, and the majority of them get training from us to try and help prevent that as well. Yeah, there's a high staff turnover in this industry, as you can imagine, so it has to be done more frequently.
Yeah, and I think more and more in terms of understanding our industry and how our industry is changing, we're moving further and further to food. We're moving further to experience rather than just about alcohol. Our business has changed dramatically over the last 15 years, where we're now, there's a much greater proportion of our income comes from food than it ever did before. And our major focus for the last 3 or 4 years has been about experience. That's about consumer experience in our venues. And that spreads across the whole industry. It's not just about trying to ply people with alcohol. It really isn't our focus at all. And I just hope that it is understood that the experiences we create make a better Wellington, we hope.
Well, tēnā korua. Thank you both for coming in and sharing with us today. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
So, councillors, what we're going to do now is vote on item 2.2. So I move the motion, which are the recommendations in the paper. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Matthews, thank you. Is there any debate? Yeah. Councillor Free, remembering that what the recommendations are.
I'll just keep it really brief, but I think there was a point made in the submission that there's been a lot of work being done to keep people safe, and I thought it was actually a really good point, and I think that there's room for us to know a little bit more about that. So I was actually a bit disappointed that we couldn't have a little bit longer. But anyway,
you're welcome to follow it up afterwards. These people are
I think that
easy
is
to
something
find.
that would be really useful for us to do, and to be able to promote some of the positive stories to go along with some of the, stories that haven't been quite so positive about what's happening in our city. That is my debate. Thank you.
Thank you. So I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded, and please vote accordingly. That is carried. So we now have one submitter who's joining us by Zoom because she wasn't able to attend the forum later this afternoon. So I'd like to welcome Prabha Ravi from the Nataraj School of Dance. Kia ora. Thank you. So you've got 10 minutes, and there might be some questions if there's a little bit of time left over in that 10 minutes.
Sure. Kia ora. Thank you so much for inviting me and providing me this opportunity to present to speak to my oral submission. Appreciate the time and also accommodating the technology to fit this in. So thank you so much for that. I'm Prabha Ravi. Just a brief introduction about myself before I just talk to my submission. I'm the founder, director, and choreographer of Nataraj School of Dance, and Indian classical dance school that's based in the Wellington region for over 23 years. So we specialize in teaching a very, very ancient classical traditional art form called Bharatanatyam. And our school is the one other school in the Wellington region that specifically specializes in teaching this art form. So we have, survived the test of time, being a 3,000-year-old ancient art form. And it's globally very well received and recognized throughout the world. So that's the art form we've been teaching, and we've graduated a lot of students. So my submission was mainly about the people and pathways that we were in the Aho-Tini strategy. So it's about the diversity and inclusion aspect of ethnic art forms, ethnic artists, ethnic communities, and just promoting, seeing what is being done in that space of proactively actually promoting or being inclusive of these ethnic art organizations that are doing some amazing work across the Wellington region. But not just me, many of our art organizations feel that we are more like, we are always seen as a community organization, not as a professional arts group, or we are not being seen as, if there's a multicultural function, then we are invited to perform just to show the diversity. But what we are really looking at is having a multidisciplinary opportunity, an incubator space, or some sort of space where art organizations come together and are able to collaborate, and facilitated by the council, and being able to promote or profile the ethnic art forms that are very rich in its culture and diversity. And that's the main submission. So we feel that we are like little stepbrothers, or we don't feel we are part of the mainstream art scenario or the scene in the Wellington region. So the submission is more about how can we make it more inclusive, how can we raise the profile, how can we connect art organizations to come up with some interdisciplinary amazing work. For example, our dance school have done several fusion performances in Parliament and few other very iconic places in the Wellington region and other parts of New Zealand, bringing kapa haka and classical dance form together on one stage. And similarly, we've done with Western Ballet, we have done fusion. So there's so much opportunity to collaborate, to grow the interdisciplinary art forms, and having a space where we can connect and grow this proactively. And venues has been a huge issue for us. I'm sure other art organizations have also submitted similar sort of venue issues in the Wellington region, where we are unable to have a space that would accommodate, that would cater for our kind of art forms, a theater setting, or which has got enough seating, and all of those sort of issues. So there's a whole lot of things. The third point is about the mainstream festivals in the Wellington region. We don't feature in that mainstream festivals like the New Zealand Arts Festival or all of those sort of different festivals that have a very high profile promotions budget and reach as well. So we are, I have been proactively talking to, I've been very active in the art space. Just to let you know, I've also been I'm in the board for some of the art organizations in the Wellington region, like the Bats Theatre, Team Aho-Tini board, and a few other boards as well. So I'm doing my best to be connected, engaged in the art space, and doing everything possible to raise this profile of ethnic dance communities. So funding for communities, specifically for community groups, not community groups, for ethnic art forms is another aspect that I wanted to talk about as well, and emphasize that unless we have that support from the council in terms of venue, in terms of incubator space, in terms of funding, and in terms of opportunity to connect, we would not be able to really be included in the true sense of inclusiveness, diversity, and inclusiveness. So that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about, to have a special funding, special space, or opportunities with the council. And I'm happy to actually connect with the art advisors or managers in this council to see how we can develop this further in the next 3 years. So that's my submission. Thank you so much.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions? No, I think you've been really clear. Thank you so much for sharing your breadth of knowledge. You've got a lot of knowledge there across a really wide sector. So thank you very much for taking the time to share with us. Kia ora.
Thank you very, very much for the opportunity as well and listening to my submission. We hope we can have something, provided for us to work together. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor, so we've just got a few things to do before we break now for lunch. So because this meeting is going to go over the 6-hour limit, I am just going to say that what do we have to vote on that? We do, don't we? It doesn't say that. Yes, I put forward that the committee agrees that we continue the meeting beyond the 6 hours limit as per Standing Order 11.7. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Foon. Reluctantly, I'm sure. So we'll now, is there any debate on that? No, we'll vote on that. Okay. And that is carried. And then I am now going to adjourn the meeting until 1:30 p.m. And at 1:30 we are meeting in 1608 next door. And there will be a thing up on the screen as to what tables people are at, but you've also received the email yesterday. So we'll see you back there at 1:30. Vote on the gap. So, councillors, do you agree that we're going to go over an hour? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Matthews? Okay, we'll now vote.
Jill, how do the Zoom people participate in the round tables later today? Are we going to be able to do that somehow, or is that?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just wondering how Jenny and I would participate in the discussion forums.
You can't. You can't. Yeah. No. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Sorry. So anyway, have a good break.
Yeah.
You will come back at 4.
Yeah.
So if you come back online at 4.
Good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
I'm just waiting on me to vote. Councillor O'Neill as well. That is carried. Thank you.
Best.